Welcome back to OWCS Partner Team Evaluations, the series where we critique and check in on all 9 partner teams to see how they're doing through each individual stage of the year. In my opinion, they're the ones who should be under the most scrutiny and the biggest microscope compared to the other teams because they're the ones getting the most resources from the league. Let's talk about and grade how all these teams did in Stage 2, and I think it's appropriate to start off with EMEA and the 3 teams they have, just knowing some of the success they found in the recent mid-season championship. And I can't think of a better team to start with than Twisted Minds. After a very disappointing Stage 1, Twisted managed to bounce back in a massive way, going from a team who wasn't able to make LAN, that was largely uncompetitive against the top teams of the region, to now being the clear-cut number 2 of EMEA and damn near making the finals of the recent mid-season tournament. This org is just so good at staying relevant. They never stay down for long if they do poorly at any time. They had concerns, they had issues after Stage 1, and they made sure to change them right off the bat, and they immediately paid dividends. You get rid of Hottie, you bring back in KSA, who's found a lot of success with this organization, you change up the support situation a little bit, bring in Simple, who's a bit better of a fit overall, and now all of a sudden you have a monster of a team. I mean, when you think about it, this team accomplished about as much as you ever could have hoped for, if not more. Technically speaking, outside of one straggle loss in that group stage where they'd end up going on to beat that Nightmare Core anywhere in the end, they basically only lost to alexyOWL. That was the only team they could not overcome, and that includes playing against Korean teams. They went up against crazy Raccoon, and they beat them. The team that you would argue is the best in the world at that point in time, and they beat them. They beat them in a 5-map series. The best team, the defending champs of the previous stage, they pulled it off. It goes to show what this team is capable of when everything's clicking. It goes back to last year. They know how to give really good teams a fight because they are capable of being world champions. With so many of the players on that team finding so much success in the past, it just seems natural for them when they have a complete roster. It didn't feel like Stage 1 where there were obvious holes. This team was way more in sync. They played a meta that they're super practiced in, and the results speak for themselves. They did a lot of great things this stage, and they've progressed so much compared to Stage 1. They look like a completely different team. You can't even recognize them compared to a couple of months prior. And just for that alone, it's worth feeling super proud of these guys and feeling very optimistic about their future. They've got everything they need. They have the teamwork, they have the confidence, and they have star power with a guy like Courts, who once again showed to the world that he truly is one of the best players this game has to offer. The sky's the limit for Twisted Minds, and this was an excellent stage for them, so I feel like it's appropriate to give them an A. Keeping that ball rolling with the positivity, or at least, I guess, a middle ground, so to speak, you got Virtus.pro. They took a notable step back with their consistency, having a couple of close calls throughout the stage, and of course looking notably worse than both Twisted Minds and alexyOWL. They were clearly EU's number 3 from start to finish, even including what happened in mid-season championship. They were the clear-cut top dog in the region just one stage prior, so they took a couple of notable steps in the wrong direction this stage, at least compared to their EU brethren. Clearly, they weren't as strong in this meta. We had to see how Virtus.pro would handle teams improving and when adversity hit them, and it seemed like for a while, maybe they weren't exactly prepared for it. That was until the mid-season championship happened. This is where, in my opinion, they really saved their stage from otherwise being a really mediocre one. Not that they had a super high finish or anything, but they got put in the so-called group of death, with AGG, Falcons, and Weibo Gaming. It seemed like an almost impossible task for them to get out of their groups. It seemed like they were probably going to get in last place just knowing how talented these other teams were and how they've been doing as of late, but they managed to pull it off. They managed to have a major win over one of the best teams in the world in Weibo Gaming. A huge win for EMEA and for themselves here, showing that they aren't quite dead just yet. They just needed a little bit of time to get the shock out of their system, and they went right back to being the team that we know they can be from the previous stage. I was really impressed with the resilience and their ability to battle it out against some of these talented Asia teams. You can't exactly be mad with a top 8 finish in the mid-season championship with all those teams, especially knowing how things were going for a while with them. I think it's a really important quality for a team to have, to be able to overcome adversity and battle back against all those questions you may be asking about yourselves when things are getting rough. This was a good statement tournament by Virtus.pro that has them back on the right track. It was a good mix for this team. There were some bad, but they definitely ended on a high note, so I'm going to give them a B for this stage. It was bad, but they finished strong, and I saw some things I really liked. Very impressed by IceNam and what he was able to contribute both on Hazard and in the Symmetra setup. Loved what I saw from Shockwave and Jaewoo in the clutch. They needed to have some kind of star power on this team if they wanted to go far, and they flashed some of that potential in that tournament. And now, maybe Virtus.pro fans have even more to look forward to, just knowing that Kevster is about to join their team for Stage 3. Stay tuned with VP. They might be the most interesting team of all in this region heading into the final stage. But that's unfortunately where the positivity stops for EMEA, because alexyOWL sadly is not a partner team. The only other partner team you have over in EU is Gen.g, and they were terrible. I'm of the belief that they're hopefully playing this for the long game with some of the players they have on this team. With the changes they made mid-season, they're shooting for the stars and hoping it can all work out for Stockholm, but right now there are some very ugly growing pains going on with this team. They were nothing short of mediocre. Just a pain to watch at times. Like, clearly better than the bottom of the barrel, but nowhere near competitive status. They were right in the middle, in that purgatory where they're just the definition of mid. And unfortunately, a lot of it comes down to Gen.g making a lot of questionable decisions, just like we saw in Stage 1. Weird composition choices, weird coaching decisions, weird moments from this team in general. It just seems to cloud this team wherever they go, no matter what's going on. Clearly, they were not a great Symmetra team, and whenever they tried matching the top sim teams, it really failed epically, blowing up in their faces every single time. And instead of trying to play through their own strengths to maybe attempt to make up for it in desperation, they just forced themselves into that mirror over and over and over when you knew it was never going to work. And that's on top of other weird decisions like questionable bans, banning Genji when you have Who Are You on your team, for example, or having Mag play heroes that aren't super comfortable for him, like the D.Va, forcing him onto that hero when there's obviously better options. It seemed like at every feasible moment, they were making the wrong decision. It was tragic to watch them play, and you could tell that nobody was comfortable out there. And now on the horizon comes some roster changes. Mag is off this team. They've got support things going on where Crispy won't be the main support anymore as well. It looks like they're going to turn to Gara potentially on that role. Lots of changes to come, and I don't know how I feel about that. Not that Mag was playing the greatest on Gen.g, but swapping tanks this late into the season is a big gamble, and I just have to question if it's too late at this point. They didn't make any real meaningful progress, and I'm very disappointed. They could not match any of the top EMEA teams. You knew that these guys were gatekeepers. I mean, they were clearly even worse than the Ultimates, and they're not even a team anymore. Gen.g did not win a single game in the tournament. They went 4-3, there's no direction, and I just have no confidence in them right now. I'm not going to give them an F just because that feels a little harsh. That's probably something you'd save if a partner team were to get like relegated or something, but they're borderline right there with how badly they played, so I'm going D-. They were clearly the worst partner team. Since we're talking about the West and letting those guys shine, let's talk about North America super quick. The positive comes on the side of Team Liquid. Much like their counterparts in Twisted Minds, they also had a relatively underwhelming first stage. They did not make it to China at the first LAN event. They had a couple of rough losses, and at times it did seem like they were a little uncomfortable and a bit inexperienced even. But then here in Stage 2, you could tell that they maybe started to shake off some of the nerves, they practiced hard to get a little bit better with their consistency, and they got a bit of a boost at the DPS line with Zera joining the team, and with his experience and what he went through the stage before and beating Crazy Raccoon, It just seemed like a really good fit and a great person to add in their time of need, and as a result, Liquid were able to thrive. They played significantly better in Stage 2. There were a couple of hiccups here and there, but what matters is that they were consistent for the most part, and they were able to get second in the stage, damn near first, forcing GK to a Game 7 in that NA Finals, and as a result, finally qualifying for a LAN after failing to do so in the previous stage, which again did feel like a bit of a disappointment. They played a lot better all around and were even able to make it out of the group stage, which is really good. Now, unfortunately, that is where the fun ended because Liquid would get their butts handed to them by T1 in the quarterfinals. It wasn't even close, and just knowing how T1 did in their other matches, it feels like maybe if they were a bit more prepared, maybe they could have handled them since they were a bit inexperienced as well. But in the end, not the biggest deal in the world. It's your first LAN, and you did show meaningful progress compared to the previous stage. And I mean that performance-wise and with all the individual members of this team, it seems like everybody kind of more so understands their role and what's to be expected out of them compared to that first stage. Maybe they're not feeling the pressure as much. I'm not exactly too sure, but I liked what I saw out of everybody. I think Infected's hero pool was able to be a little bit more fleshed out. Zera brought in the firepower, and I think him and Tree were able to complement each other well. I think Tree in general just benefited from having him compared to Knife, who maybe he wasn't as comfortable playing alongside with. And I think RuPaul and Vega were finally able to figure out how to be the best possible backline for this team compared to playing on Toronto, who were a super team for NA standards beforehand. Overall, it's hard to complain. I think Liquid had a good stage for themselves. Clearly, they fell short of a couple of benchmarks. They lost some winnable games that could have made at least a little bit of a difference to me. And they still have to get over that whole slow start thing where they just shoot themselves in the foot constantly and dig themselves into too big of a hole to defeat these really good teams that you know they can beat. But maybe after learning some lessons from this stage, they can apply that to the next, and they can overcome those last few weaknesses and become the best versions of themselves possible. But for now, I think they can look back at Stage 2 as a success. I'm giving them a B for their grade. And again, following the trend of EMEA, you got one good team and one bad team over in North America, because SSG were a pretty big flop. They had a pretty solid first stage. I mean, they found tournament success in both NA and international standards. It seemed like they had a relatively solid roster on paper, but things kind of fell apart in Stage 2. I never thought I'd say this about a team with Sugar Free and Kellen and Bliss and all these really notable players, but SSG were the gatekeepers of North America. This team just had a difficult time stringing together consistent fight wins, you know? Sometimes they could show brilliance, but then other times they would completely and utterly stall out. Oftentimes, this felt like Sugar Free trying to carry this team to his absolute best ability just for it to fail. This team had zero notable results from Stage 2. They never even made it close with GK, Liquid, or Nightmare. It was like witnessing a painful death with what happened in that lower bracket semifinal. A chance to still potentially make LAN on the line, and they get completely and utterly smoked by Nightmare. That's when you knew it was Jover, and now here in the present, they're undergoing some significant changes with their team. Hunter's not the coach anymore, Seeker's gone, Bliss is gone, Kellen's gone. I'm left having so many questions about SSG, and now there's only going to be more as they try and reconstruct this roster and build it around Sugar Free more effectively. Just knowing that they were clearly the fourth wheel and how they had such a big downfall compared to Stage 1, I feel pretty entitled to give them a D grade here. Potentially D-, but I don't think it's quite as bad as Gen.g, so we'll go D. And that wraps up all your Western teams, so let's get into the meat now, Korea, where we've got 4 different squads to discuss. First up is going to be Falcons, who had the weirdest stage I have maybe ever seen in my entire life. It starts off on such a high. They brought in someone in Merit. They have so many different options now. This team on paper should be the best in the league potentially, but it just doesn't feel that way. They start off struggling big time. They can't incorporate someone into the team appropriately. He actually looks like trash out there. You can't seem to figure out the DPS rotation. You've got players taking breaks with proper taking multiple weeks off, and you looking terrible in the Korea playoffs, having to go through the last chance qualifier if you want to make the midseason championship, just for you to suddenly turn things around on a dime with a massive 180 and cruise through the LCQs and then cruise through the midseason championship to win the entire thing. You bring Proper back into the team, you sacrifice Stalker in return, and Proper returns to his prime MVP form all of a sudden. He looks insane alongside Merit. Now, admittedly, I do think they benefited a lot from the meta. Like, it was one of the best possible Falcons metas possible because they love the brawly setups, and when Proper can just do whatever he wants on Tracer, that's kind of just a bonus. So we'll have to see how they do beyond that in Stage 3 if a lot of changes do end up happening. But they were able to find their second wind. They got their wings back. They remembered what it's like to have the heart of a champion, and now anything is possible. No matter what, though, in the end, you got to give Falcons a relatively good grade for winning the tournament in the end, but I don't want to go as far as saying like A+ or anything, just because there were a lot of downsides that happened with this stage as well, and I don't think one championship can counteract all of that completely, but I'd be a fool to give them anything less than an A-. If there wasn't all of this drama and they were consistent throughout, probably would have been an A+ with how insanely clutch they were in this tournament, but you got to remember the negatives and have something to improve upon for the next stage. So I'm going A- for Falcons. Congrats on winning the championship. Now I'd like to talk about the team that was pretty consistently number 2 in Korea, aka T1. Another team that seemed to have some massive improvements after somewhat underperforming in the stage beforehand. We'd heard a lot of good things about T1 in Stage 1, about how they were scrimming so hard, and how they had a lot of potential, and at times they were able to flash that, and others they'd completely fall short, which again led to them not even making LAN or even having a chance in that Asia tournament that happened beforehand. So, in Stage 2, they decided that they were going to grind even harder. They made some improvements with the backline, adding in just that one piece that they needed with Vigilante. Seemed like a better piece to have next to Skewed, and all of a sudden, they were off to the moon, beating Crazy Raccoon not once, but twice if you include the seeding decider. And in the end, they faced Crazy Raccoon and got second place in that Korea finals, which was really impressive as it is. But then they also were able to make the semis and have a chance at least at top 3 in the midseason championship, which again is a far cry compared to that Stage 1 team who just couldn't find any consistency to save their lives. They could not go on a win streak. But this team was able to win many, many games in a row. At one point, I think the winning streak was like 10 before losing to Crazy Raccoon in the Korea final. That's just so amazing compared to what I saw not that long before. I'm super happy with what T1 is doing. They have a lot of young players who are seeking guidance and are trying to put themselves in that upper echelon of teams, and I think they made a good step in the right direction. I'm really happy with what I witnessed. I mentioned again the backline. I liked the steady improvement we saw with that. I didn't know what to expect with having Skewed and Vigilante in a potential main support role, but at times they absolutely killed it there. Donghak, he needed to be the leader of this team, and most of the time he definitely was, despite being a pretty young player himself. He showed success on Orisa and Hazard and Ball and so many different compositions. He was able to consistently be a threat, which was really important for this team. And I think the DPS line did really well too at times. Proud seems like a pretty nasty Freya player. And Zest, I've mentioned before many times on this channel, it seems like he's returned to form as a player, especially on the Venture and Tracer. Very impressive stuff. I feel pretty happy about T1's performance, and I'm willing to give them a B+ for their overall stage performance. I like the strides they made as a team, especially as a young one, but they clearly still do have a ways to go. You know, they did well for the most part holding it together, but in the EWC, the inexperience definitely did show when they had to play the tough teams. They kind of boomed against Falcons when they had opportunities, and then from there, they just couldn't recover mentally when they had a serious chance to maybe get third place against Twisted Minds. There's still things this team can improve upon, but because they're young and because they're figuring it out, maybe they'll be able to get there at some point. But there were some teams in Korea that didn't play all that well, or at the very least were disappointing compared to what you'd expect from them. The big team, of course, is Crazy Raccoon in this situation, who didn't have a horrible stage per se. I mean, they won Korea, the hardest region to play in, and they still felt like the best team in the world for most of Stage 2 overall, but in the EWC, they were a massive flop, and at the end of the day, I think that's the only thing that they care about, and what we care about as well. We know they have the talent to beat anyone at any given time, but it's about the accolades and racking up those championships, and they failed to do so in a big way in the EWC, not even getting past the quarterfinals of the playoff bracket. They lost in the first round. It was a close game, yeah, but they still lost. They lost to Twisted Minds, a non-Korean team, and for them, that was probably a bit of a shock, going through that for the second stage in a row, and this time not having the benefit of the lower bracket to bail them out, like when they lost to Nightmare. This was just a massive slap in the face for them. That goes to show that there are a lot of imperfections with this team. There are specific metas that they are not all that great in, and for whatever reason, they just refuse to get better at them. And that once again reared its ugly head. In a rush brawly setup, they just could not figure it out. They were not confident enough to match Twisted Minds in that rush mirror, despite all the talent that they have. Some might say it's just an unlucky meta, and once they patch up Ram and make him less broken, they should be okay. But I don't like having that mindset. If you want to be the best at all times, you've got to be more flexible than that. You've got to be able to overcome those weaknesses and seriously work on them. Don't leave your fate up to chance. That's all I'm going to say. It's not worth it with this game. Things are way too unpredictable. You've got to be prepared for just about anything. This team wants to win anything and everything. They've shown that with their actions and with their words. And now that that's not possible, I'd like to see how they respond. Just remember what happened last year to you guys, Crazy Raccoon. Remember what happened when you got embarrassed by Falcons in the World Championship. Do you really want to live through that again? I don't think so. This generally could be their final season as a core together, so they've got to make it count. It's going to sound crazy to be so harsh about a team that's this good, that's accomplished so much, but I think both us as fans and them know that anything short of being one of the absolute best is just unacceptable for their standards. I feel like you have to be harsh with a team that has a reputation like theirs. They didn't do well in the tournament, and that's really the only thing that matters for them. I give them some credit for how they did in Korea, but with how things went in the EWC, I feel like I gotta give them a C here. It was a very mediocre stage for their standards. Not making a finals is a first, and that's gotta hurt. Speaking of hurting, Zeta Division didn't have the best stage themselves. The big question was, how could this team do adjusting in the post-Violet era? And the answer was not all that well. They had some ups and downs. There were moments where you'd think maybe they're turning the corner, but they just couldn't find that consistency factor. Things felt kind of awkward at times depending on some of the hero selections, and I think not having that triple threat rotation at DPS and having alphaE play main support instead really hurt them in the long run. I thought that was the biggest strength of the team in Stage 1, so you knew it was going to be a tough adjustment, and we saw it play out. 5 and 3 isn't a garbage stage, and they still technically got top 4, so they had a guaranteed spot in the Korea tournament in their hands, but it's how they played afterwards that was just really disappointing. My problem was they didn't have any real notable wins this stage, and they basically were dropping maps in all of their wins against teams that they were obviously better than, like Vec, and with Old Ocean and Poker Face, they just couldn't put anyone away, which was pretty alarming. And in the end, it didn't really do much for them with how they played in the actual playoff section. Crushed by T1, crushed by AGG with a chance to get top 3 in an automatic EWC slot, and then crushed by Falcons in the last chance qualifier final. It's just so sad to see them always fall just short of their goal of making a LAN. Outside of when they had an easy spot at EWC last year, which wasn't even OWCS affiliated, they have failed to make every single tournament. Every time they seem to just run into Falcons and lose to them in heartbreaking fashion. And this one may have felt the worst to me. because Falcons were maybe the most vulnerable they've ever been at this point. Obviously, we know what they'd end up becoming in the end, but at the time, with how much they were struggling throughout Korea, it felt like Zeta genuinely had a chance in this match, and they got obliterated in 3-0 fashion. I just don't know what else to say at this point. They don't have a clutch bone in their body. Whenever there's a chance to beat one of their rivals and do something special, they flop under the pressure. And now with all the changes going on with their team constantly, it makes me wonder if their time really is up and if this team is just destined for failure, despite the overwhelming talent they possess. But now things are falling apart at the seams. We had questions about them in Stage 1 after Violet left and everything heading into this one. And now things are only going to get worse as Flora has also decided he is ready to start a new chapter with a different team, leaving yet another hole on the original roster that could have been so much more. After the whole LCQ thing and Flora leaving, that really may have broken this team's back. It really may be over. I think they actually might be cooked at this point. With how things were going in Stage 2 with Falcons and all these other random teams, this felt like maybe their final chance to actually do something, and they failed once again. And now somehow I'm asking even more questions about them than I did at the beginning of Stage 2. Didn't know that was humanly possible. Really rough stage for Zeta Division. I wanted to see a lot more out of them, even though I knew they were kind of at a disadvantage. I think because of that whole Alfie main support thing, I'll go a little easy on them, but I'm not going any higher than a D+. Really rough stage to watch. And that will do it for my OWCS partner team mid-season evaluation. Let me know how you think all 8 teams did down in the comments below in Stage 2, and I suppose you guys will hear from me again about these teams at the end of the year post-Stockholm. Until then, hope you guys enjoyed, like the video if you did, and I'll see you next time.